Good afternoon, and for everybody on the East Coast, and of course, good morning for those of you on the West Coast. I really appreciate everybody joining us today for this meeting. I know that everyone's really busy, and I really appreciate your participation here today. I'd like to note that it's my pleasure to continue to serve as chair of the Property and Casualty Committee. There's a lot of really important issues that come before this committee, and I'm looking forward to another successful year as chair of this committee. The purpose for the committee today is to conduct some business in advance of next month's Las Vegas meeting so that the committee is able to handle all of its issues in Las Vegas in a timely manner. This committee also needs to decide and determine how to move forward with some very important issues. So as we begin 2022, our agenda is clear and as organized as possible. As you can see from today's agenda, the committee is very busy, so it's important that we give each topic the time and attention it deserves while still ensuring that every topic is afforded its proper time. So I know everyone will understand that we'll need to manage the discussion closely today to keep us within that hour-and-a-half time frame. So the first topic this morning is a discussion on the development of an NCOIL Delivery Network Company Model Act. As most of you know, in 2015, NCOIL adopted a model act to regulate insurance requirements for transportation network companies and transportation network drivers. It's commonly been referred to as the TNC Model Act. The model has been one of NCOIL's most successful, and it's served as a basis for almost every state's TNC law. During the last couple of years, delivery network companies, commonly referred to as DNCs, have grown in popularity. The DNC term, I'm referring to companies that allow people to use their personal vehicles to deliver food or beverages to your home, companies you've heard of probably like Grubhub or Drizzly. Recently, there have been conversations started, and in some instances, bills introduced focused on the need to develop a framework setting forth insurance requirements for DNCs, much like NCOIL did with the TNC model. This is because the TNC model and state laws based on the model only address transportation of people for hire and not delivery of goods. You might recall that I briefly mentioned this issue at the end of the committee's meeting in Scottsdale, and I'd like to use today's meeting as a starting point for the committee to discuss the issue along with interested persons who might want to weigh in. I think everyone would agree that insurance protection is essential, but the same level of coverage may not be required for a sandwich as it may be for a family. Before we open up this discussion among committee members and other legislators, I'll first ask if there are any interested persons or organizations online who would like to comment, and if so, please announce yourself and tell us who you're representing.
Yes, hello, this is Joe Messina with Uber. Appreciate the consideration of these issues and the opportunity to provide some comments. Uber is supportive of a model delivery insurance bill that recognizes the unique risks really that are posed by delivery activity, especially as compared to TNCs. I think some of those risks are obvious to the committee, perhaps some less so. Of course, in the DNC context, there's obviously no passenger in the vehicle. There's much less risk associated with carrying a salad than an individual. But perhaps less obviously, our business shows the period one risk in particular. So that's the time while a driver is awaiting to receive a request, but is online on the app, is much different for DNCs than TNCs. In the delivery context, what we see at Uber is that drivers don't simply drive around circling blocks on the app awaiting a delivery request as they might in the TNC context, for example. The business models of DNCs are also importantly different when you're starting to consider a model bill like this. For example, if you look at Target or Amazon Flex, those folks actually permit drivers to pre-book time slots. So that means drivers, again, are not trolling the streets awaiting a request. Instead, they're only in a state such that they are always fulfilling a request. All that's to say, again, Uber's certainly supportive of a model bill. We just don't think the standard TNC insurance model bill requirements should necessarily apply in the DNC context. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you being on the call today. It's always good to have Uber involved in a discussion like this. Any other interested parties out there?
Mr. Chairman.
Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andrew Kirkner on behalf of the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. Would just echo part of Joe's comments and perhaps deviate from them a little bit, but I'll keep it brief. The first thing I would say is that I think NAMIC and its members are certainly interested in a model as well. I think it makes sense for standardization to occur in this space. The good news, I think, and I don't, this isn't too much of a divergence from what Joe said. I think the TNC framework makes sense as a place to start. And certainly there may be some discussions about what levels of coverage are appropriate inside of that framework. The one thing I would point out to the committee or ask NCOIL to keep in mind as it considers this legislation, at the end of the day, whether it's delivery, whether it's driving folks around, there is a change in risk from general driving behaviors under a normal auto policy. So if we take the phase one that Joe just referred to, perhaps an individual is parked in a different neighborhood than they would normally be. It doesn't necessarily mean that the commercial limits need to be higher. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's the same standard in the TNC model needs to apply, but it is a change in risk. And so as we go through this process, we'd certainly be looking to work with you, Mr. Chairman, with Uber and the other companies that are in this space on the production of a model. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I believe Marty Young with Buckle is on the call and has a comment.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me. My name is Marty Young. I'm the CEO of Buckle. We provide insurance and credit to gig workers in partnership with a number of the TNCs and DNCs in a very unique model where we're able to adjust the indemnity depending on what the driver is doing. To echo some of the comments made by Uber and others, one of the things we'd ask you to consider, and we will certainly be happy to provide you the data, is that not all delivery is the same. We agree that rideshare risk is very different than delivery risk, but delivering for a restaurant is very different risk than delivering for a grocery store, which is very different risk for delivering for a quote convenience store, such as a GoPuff in a hyper local context, and very different than, for example, Amazon delivery risk. We support and insure all these different flavors of delivery risk. And we would simply suggest, as you consider a DNC model bill, it may not be one size fit all, but might have to be contextualized depending on the risks of the driver, the recipient of the goods, and the general public. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Marty. I believe Frank O'Brien is with us today and has some comments. Frank?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it bears mention that the fact that we're even having the start of this discussion is reflective of the benefit that NCOIL has brought to this particular space. Many of us recall the battles that took place when the TNC law was being developed. And we welcome the opportunity for NCOIL to serve as a space where all aspects of this particular issue, whether it be by the traditional insurance market, the trades, Buckle, Uber, what have you. NCOIL has become a leader in the shared economy space, and we look forward to having this discussion with NCOIL, and we're optimistic that an appropriate model will be able to be developed with the assistance of this committee. And so we look forward to that discussion commencing in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Frank. Are there any other interested parties online that have comments on this topic at this time? Hearing none, are there any legislators on the call that have comments or thoughts on the issue at this time? Hearing nothing from legislators, thank you everyone for the discussion on this topic. I think by the Las Vegas meeting, we'll have a rough draft of possibly what a model could look like, something that we could at least start a discussion with. This is a very important issue and one that I'm interested in perhaps sponsoring. So I look forward to working with everyone on the committee and all interested parties on this topic. We'll move right along to discussion number 2, which is continued discussion on state efforts to lower the uninsured motorist population and the NCOIL Fairness for Responsible Drivers Act. For this topic, I'll turn things over to Sean Vetta of North Carolina, sponsor of the NCOIL draft for Fairness for Responsible Drivers Model Act. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to correct you on the state from North Dakota, but
you're right, North Dakota. Sorry about that.
It's a lot warmer North Carolina, so Wouldn't mind being there right now. But yeah, many of us legislators have dealt with the issue of trying to lower our respective state uninsured motorist population, and different states have utilized different methods to do so. In 2014, NCOIL adopted a resolution in support of no pay, no play laws. With draft model that you see before you, which I'm sponsoring, is intended to be viewed as the next step in support of those laws in the form of a model law. The model and the laws in the approximate 10 states that have similar laws, including my home state of North Dakota, prohibits uninsured drivers or personal representatives of said drivers who sustain bodily injury or property damage as a result of a motor vehicle accident from recovering non-economic damages from the person's bodily injury or property damage or death. It's important to note that such prohibition does not apply to economic damages, and there are several what I think are appropriate exceptions set forth in the model. The discussion of the model, when first introduced in Charleston last April, generated an important dialogue and serious concerns regarding possible unintended consequences of the model. They were raised, which made clear that the model was not good or ready to proceed. Since the time the committee has been presented with other models states have utilized to lower the uninsured motorist population, such as simply increasing the penalties for driving uninsured, as it is likely that it is less expensive to risk a penalty than to pay the auto insurance premium. Increased education efforts about the auto insurance system in general and the benefits of coverage and how those with higher premiums can lower them. Tort reform efforts, developing an online insurance verification, OLV, web-based system. This system provides instantaneous verification of coverage at any time. Approximately 15 states have implemented this type of system, with Illinois being the latest to do so. Regarding how it works in Illinois, it's my understanding that twice per year, motorists are subject to random checks for insurance coverage. A written request will be sent to the motor vehicle owner by electronic verifications. If those are unsuccessful, and then the secretary of the state will suspend the registration of the vehicle if the owner does not show proof of insurance. Vehicle owners must contact their insurance company to notify their insurance agent that they have received the Secretary of State's letter and the specific reference number on it. Vehicle owners who receive the letter are urged not to visit driver services, but to contact their insurance company or agent who can provide them with the necessary electronic proof of insurance. License plates of vehicles without automobile insurance will be suspended unless they obtain insurance, and they will be charged a $100 fee to have their plates reinstated. Also, another method some states have utilized is permitting all residents of a state, regardless of their immigration status or citizenship, to obtain driver's licenses, thereby permitting them to obtain auto insurance. These laws are commonly referred to as green light laws. I understand laws like this would not pass in many states, but following New York's passage of such a law, New York's uninsured population has declined. In consultation with Chair Rowland, we agreed that we'd like to hear feedback from legislators and interested parties as to what direction the committee should take with respect to this issue. Should we proceed with further development of the model? Proceed with developing a different model, such as one setting forth the legislative framework for an online insurance verification system? Endorse another method via a resolution, or put a pause on discussing the overall issue? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back over to you, and I look forward to hearing from everyone.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions or comments at this time? We'll start with committee members.
Mr. Chairman, just before we get to legislative discussion, just want to let everyone know your Vice Chair, North Carolina Senator Vicky Sawyer has Zoomed on, as well as Indiana Representative Peggy Mayfield, Connecticut Representative Tammy Nuccio. If anyone else has Zoomed on that wasn't on at the beginning, if you could please announce yourself.
Hello, this is Representative Carl Anderson from South Carolina.
Representative Tammy Nuccio from Connecticut.
Thank you all. Any comments, questions for Senator from any of the committee members or legislators that are online at this time?
Looks like Representative Ferguson has a question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Ferguson.
Yeah, I'm just a big believer in data. Do we have any who the uninsured are? I mean, are they primarily illegal immigrants? Are they primarily young people? I mean, are there groups that can provide that data for us?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I guess,
yes, sir.
I've heard that data before. In committee meetings, I guess, in my home state, and yes, there is that information out there. Of course, not sure if NCOIL has that, or if there's anybody online with interested parties that would be able to speak up on that.
Or I can jump in.
Go ahead, Ken.
Good morning, Ken Cooley out in California. Yeah, I do think very often individual state insurance departments may do a summary, whether it's every year or every few years, and offer an estimate. So you can always check with them. The Insurance Research Council or similar organizations will often have marketplace estimates. So that's a good online source to look for. It's kind of a moving target. Another way to look at it is just what has been happening to the cost of auto insurance in a given state. The backstory actually to no pay, no play in California, it was adopted by the voters of California as a ballot proposition in 1996. And 1996 followed a period of time when, for a lot of reasons, and of which litigation was a key factor, auto insurance rates had increased in California by 150% during the 1980s. So when auto insurance was just soaring so rapidly, not merely doubling, but 150%, we did see a jump in uninsured motorists. And at that point, it was passed by the voters. And if you want to look at that ballot proposition, it was Proposition 213, 1996, California. I imagine there's a great deal of commentary online about the ballot proposition, and by this time, even its effects, how people analyze what it did. So those are just some thoughts on the general data question. But I do think checking in with your insurance department, they will have their data wizards who will know what they have and other sources relevant to your state.
Thank you, Senator Cooley.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I just looked back at some notes in North Dakota. Our state insurance department has estimated it as high as 19% of the drivers in certain demographics in the state, in our state, has failed to keep the liability portion of their insurance, for an extended period of time. There's people that hop in and hop out, as they're able, to pay. But that was one of the estimates that they had at the time.
Mr. Chairman, we could nail this data down by March.
That'd be perfect, Tom. Any other legislators, committee members on the call who have comments or questions? If not, we'll move along to interested persons or organizations. Any
Chairman.
interested person, organization? Andrew, do you have comments?
I do. I'll be very brief. I know the committee has heard from me on this topic a couple times, so I would just like to briefly sort of reemphasize the impetus behind what's been dubbed as the Fairness for Responsible Drivers Act here, what is known as no pay, no play in some states. It is, I had the opportunity to present to NCOIL on this topic. As I believe Assembly Member Cooley or Senator Vita said, there's about 10 states that have adopted something similar. It's important to note that the results have been mixed in terms of lowering the uninsured motorist population. So there's not, in our view, a strong correlation between those two things, although it could, right? So I want to be clear with the committee. The purpose behind a Fairness for Responsible Drivers Act is embedded in the name. To make sure that the insurance system is fair. If folks are legally uninsured, they should not be collecting non-economic damages as a result of their failure to participate in the insurance pool. This is a problem that drives the cost of insurance up for those that do choose to participate in the insurance pool. And so, it's our belief that it's absolutely appropriate for NCOIL to act on a freestanding Fairness for Responsible Drivers Act. We would also, to your point, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor's point, we are certainly supportive of other efforts to lower uninsured motorist population, including the Fairness for Responsible Driver, but we'd certainly be happy to participate in discussions outside of the model as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online who has comments, questions? Tom, I think you're muted.
Oh, Will had me muted. That often happens here. If there are no other comments on this, I would just say we don't want to kind of go back to the old NCOIL where something stays on the agenda for years. So Senator Veda did list a number of different options and a desire for the committee members to think about this between now and March with the thought of coming to Las Vegas and deciding on the best path to go, whether that's the model that Andrew spoke about or another model that incorporates the Illinois approach or any of the other approaches. But rather than just having a continuing dialogue on this, it'd be wonderful if we could the committee could move towards consensus in March and certainly wrapping up some approach so it doesn't go beyond this year.
Sounds good. Are we ready to move on to the next topic then now? Is Representative Lehman online yet? I know he was running late.
He is due to arrive momentarily, Mr. Chairman, so it should be a couple minutes, so we could wait, or we could just jump out of order here and go to the topic after that.
Okay, let's do that, Will. Let's move to the final topic on the agenda, then we'll come back and pick up Representative Lehman and his topic. I believe it's a topic that you're going to present on, Will, and it's update on state laws regarding dog breed information and insurance underwriting. So I'll turn it over to you, Will.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is meant to just be kind of an update and a follow-up on the discussion of this issue that was the focus of a general session at the last meeting in Scottsdale. And it generally focuses on how insurers can utilize certain information relating to the breed of dogs in underwriting. And so laws have been enacted in several states, and bills have been recently introduced in other states that, generally speaking, tend to deal with this issue in different ways. Some laws and bills just prohibit certain insurers from refusing to issue, cancel, renew, or increase a premium or rate of a policy of insurance based solely on the breed of a dog or a mixture of breeds of a dog that's harbored or owned on an applicable property. And there are other approaches that are more so focused on information gathering. For example, a law that was recently enacted in Illinois requires certain insurers to collect certain information relating to claims involving dog-related incidents and annually report that information to the Department of Insurance. I'm happy to provide that information that's required to be reported, but I won't read it all now just in the interest of time. And a copy of that law is also on the NCOIL website. So New York and Nevada, they have recently enacted laws, and I see Assemblyman Cahill's hand raised. They've recently enacted laws codifying the first approach that I mentioned, and Minnesota has recently introduced a bill, a similar bill that's scheduled for a hearing later this month. And then there is also a bill recently introduced in Arizona, where we just had the conference, that prohibits the breed of a dog from being considered used in several situations, such as underwriting purposes, information gathering, and also findings of fact or conclusions of law regarding whether a dog is aggressive or vicious or has caused liability to occur in coverage determinations. So I know this isn't meant to be a complete exhaustive legislative update, just kind of a snapshot of the recent activity. We, of course, welcome this to be supplemented when this opens up for discussion. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Will. And before we open up for comments, I'd just like to note that this issue is not on the committee's agenda for Las Vegas. Neither Will or any of staff or myself have heard from a legislator yet who's looking to sponsor a model act on this topic. But I thought we would have a discussion here today to hear thoughts on the issue and kind of see how everyone thinks NCOIL should engage on this issue. So at this time, are there any comments or questions on this topic from legislators or committee members on the call?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the bill that was passed in New York fits the first category that Will mentioned. That is the refusal to concerning refusal to issue or renew, cancel, or change or impose an increased premium or rate. It does not include a study, but I want to just discuss very briefly about the impact of that bill, which was signed into law by the governor in December. The impact of the law has been that largely across the board, insurance companies have honored it and complied with both the spirit and the letter of the law. But there was one company that decided that the law did not say that they couldn't exclude the coverage, even though we made all those motions to make sure that that was clearly the intent. They said no, but if we exclude the coverage altogether, then we're allowed to. The other circumstance that we've encountered is that some insurance companies have lowered umbrella policies from the desired level to a significantly lower level because the dog exclusion is no longer allowed. We are amending the law in New York State. At the present time, we are amending it to say to add the words or exclude coverage under the policy or contract. We believe that will empower the Department of Financial Services, our insurance regulatory arm, to prohibit insurance companies from discriminating against their policyholders based upon the breed of dog. But I did want to give you this update that there has been some interpretation of the law, and by the way, an interpretation that the Department of Financial Services does not necessarily disagree with. That the law as written is not written broadly enough to have the impact that was desired. That being said, Mr. Chairman, I will take you up on your offer to introduce a model act, but my model act would be including both components of what was mentioned. I think it is important that we recognize that the current science tells us that the breed of dog does not determine the dangerousness of that dog, but there are many other factors that do. That doesn't mean that's definitive or final, and we should require our departments of insurance to go back and give us that additional information. So I will, between now and our meeting in Las Vegas, come up with a generic proposal and ask that you consider taking it up in due course in accordance with the rules of NCOIL for the introduction of a model act. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Any other legislator, committee member on the call who has comments or questions?
I do.
Representative?
Do I count?
Yes.
So I'm not going to be able to be at the Las Vegas meeting, but I am definitely interested in helping with any model legislation on this. Something that I've started to try to have talks about in Connecticut also. I have seen some of the other states' laws. So if there's anything that I can do to help, please let me know who I talk to or how I go about doing that. This is my first time on one of these calls and not in an in-person meeting. So.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. We'll have Will with the General Counsel of NCOIL reach out to you and he can help direct you where you need to go. Any other members? If not, do we have any interested parties who have comments or questions regarding a potential model on this topic? Frank O'Brien, I believe I see you with your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. And to my good friend from New York, Assemblyman Cahill, we look forward to seeing your proposal, working with you on it. We may have a different point of view, but that is what the NCOIL process would be. I do ask, just as a point of clarification, Assemblyman Cahill mentioned that it would be put in and taken up in due course, accordance with the rules of NCOIL. I would assume that in order for it to be introduced in Las Vegas, the 30-day rule would need to be waived. But I would also, it sounds like the sponsor is intending for this to be taken up in due course, which would be maybe an intro in Las Vegas, and then initial consideration, if you will, at the summer meeting. It may be too early for you, Mr. Chair, or the sponsor to articulate that, the thinking on that, but it would be.
Frank, I'll articulate my perspective, and that is to be as cooperative and deliberate as possible. So no, we won't be asking to waive the 30 days.
And just a clarification on that, Mr. Chairman, the 30-day rule impacts items on which a vote is scheduled. So there's no 30-day rule for simply the introduction of a model.
Thank you, Tom. So I will defer to you and Will on that, on how we should go about the introduction and the timing of that. I know that Will has a pretty full agenda put together for us already for Vegas. So if it's something that needs to be introduced on an interim call before the summer meeting or at the summer meeting, maybe that'll be better, but I'll just, I'll defer to you all on how to handle that. Are there any other interested groups or persons who have comments or questions on this topic? If not, Will, has Representative Lehman joined us now?
I have a comment, if possible.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us and having this discussion. Stacy Coleman here, the Executive Director of National Canine Research Council, which focuses on reliable and methodologically sound dog bite data, and also Animal Farm Foundation, which is an advocacy group for people who have dogs in their families. I just wanted to speak up and say that I am so glad that you all are hearing this conversation. But I wanted to emphasize that I don't know that any of us who are working on this issue want to follow up with legislation in a state by state manner, because that takes forever. But we have been left with no other options, because working directly with the insurance companies has left us nowhere. The insurance companies do not have the data to justify excluding dogs based on a breed label. They do not have the data to justify excluding dog owners based on their zip code or their race or what is presumed about them because they own a dog of a particular label. What needs to happen, and which will make this process so much easier, is if insurance is honest about where it's getting its information and is truthful about the data that they have. I know that in the times that we have encountered public conversations with insurance representatives, they have cited unreliable and debunked science. And if we could just resolve that issue, and seriously, if an insurance wants to exclude particular dog owners, they can. It's their choice, but they need to be honest about why and stop putting the blame on what the dog looks like. So thank you for my time.
Thank you. Anyone else
Mr. Chairman,
who would like to speak on this topic?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So just briefly, two things that should not go unanswered in the comments that were just made. Number one, if the National Canine Research Council is supposed to be a repository of data, I would very much appreciate them not making comments about insurers excluding on the basis of race or being dishonest in the information they're providing without bringing data to the table. I think that's inappropriate for the discourse at NCOIL. So that's a threshold matter. As to the bill, we understand that there are some states that are considering model legislation about what information, breed information insurers can and cannot use. I do want to be clear with the group here that this is not some massive groundswell on the ground. I believe there are 6 states, although I certainly am open to anything that's happened today, that have adopted legislation. There are others that are considering it, but this is not, to the extent that there is an inference that there's a groundswell and a need for this, I would rebut that. I would also say, Mr. Chairman, that there's been no evidence presented to NCOIL or in the state discussions that I'm aware of that would indicate an availability problem. The nation's largest homeowners and renters insurer in the country does not ask you about dog breed. Instead, they ask about the history of the dog. Now, that is their prerogative, and they should be allowed to do that. Other companies, if their claims data and external studies and actuarial science tells them that certain dog breeds are in fact dangerous, then they should in fact be able to use that information to make underwriting and rating decisions. I with complete respect to Assemblymember Cahill, and I mean that seriously, we have a fundamental disagreement about what the role of legislators should be in a competitive insurance marketplace. It's our view that in a competitive insurance marketplace, where the nation's largest homeowners and renters carriers and 2 of the top 10 carriers in the country do not factor this in, that availability is not a problem for consumers. And so we don't believe the time is ripe for NCOIL to act here. We'll certainly participate in that process and hopefully provide a counter balance to some of the information that's been provided here today and in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else on this topic?
Yes, please. Susan Riggs from the ASPCA, and I wanted to start by thanking Assemblymember Cahill for his willingness to take this up as a model ordinance for a future NCOIL meeting. I just wanted to respond quickly to the comments of the gentleman prior to me. And I think, at issue is not the availability of insurance in the market, it is that transparency and accuracy of the underwriting standards. And I think, as many of you probably have seen, the data that has been produced out of Massachusetts that came from property insurers, and clearly there is a dearth of rationale for the underwriting standards that are utilizing breed at this point. So I would encourage everyone to go back and look at those. If you haven't already, we're happy to provide those to you. It's public data provided directly by the insurance companies. And I think you will clearly see that the relationship that is being asserted by the insurance companies is lacking in that data that has been provided. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this topic? Questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move along from this topic for now. Sounds like we will potentially be revisiting it later this year. Will, can you tell me if Representative Langman's on the line now?
He was just logging in as those last comments were winding down. He was having a little trouble. He did not used to be technologically challenged when he was president. I don't know what's happened in the interim.
It's probably because you all did it all for him at that time.
Well, everyone like Ken Cooley, this would all be a lot smoother.
Well,
Well, how are we doing?
we are ahead of schedule, so we've got a few minutes if we want to wait on him to get connected.
I'm going to suggest maybe he used the dial-in option if the video was really challenging. I'm just, 1 second. Tell him to speak again, Will. He alleges he's on now. Nothing.
Tom, I see him, but we can't hear him.
Oh, we see you, but we can't hear you. Will, you may need to unmute him from your computer.
If it was you, Tom, that would be the ideal blend of technology to see you.
Okay, I'm gonna take that as you're saying I'm so attractive to look at.
There you go.
So thank you.
Yeah, it says you're on right now.
Yeah, we see Matt, and it looks like he's in his car, which isn't great to be zooming in from his car.
That's a different model, Tom.
There he is.
I'm on speaker.
Yeah.
Can you put that right by your little button?
How about now?
So what are we doing? Hey, Bart, I can see Bart. But he can't see me. He can hear me.
Oh,
I can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you now, Matt.
You're good, Matt.
Can you hear me now?
I think we're
What
good.
did you do that let me hear you now? I'm not driving, by the way. I'm sitting in a parking lot of a funeral home.
Representative Lehman, when you're ready, we're ready for your portion of the committee discussion today, which is the introduction and discussion on the NCOIL Insurance Underwriting Transparency Model Act. If you're ready to go, we're glad to hear from you on that topic now.
And everybody can hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. So first, okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I apologize for some of the technical problems here. I am sitting in a parking lot of a funeral home in Fort Wayne, Indiana, so I'm not driving. I'm going to get my work done here for you guys. So a couple of things that was kind of to give some background a little bit. When we formed our special committee on race, we looked at some things that had to do with underwriting. We did a couple of resolutions. And one of the resolutions that came out of that meeting was that we were asking the P&C committee to consider a resolution. We did a resolution regarding insurance score transparency and then referred that to this committee. So for a bit of background, I just talked to a group yesterday or day before, and I told them, I said, 30 years in this business, and I said, if you look at the past, everything was kind of tangible. If you came in and got a quote, I ran your MBR, I ran your crew report, and then more recently your credit. And then if there was a problem, either a renewal or even at your issuance, I had something tangible to cite. I could say, hey, you had a DUI, or you had 5 accidents, or your credit really is bad. Those things you need to work on to get a better rate or to get a policy. Over the last couple of years, the trend has moved more into data collection, more into telematics, more into the predictive modeling, et cetera. And that's none of those things are bad, but if it begins to drive this issue of what is in my rate that is creating either that increase I'm getting or maybe my denial of coverage. So I began to work on some language here in Indiana on a bill that I have now effectively I'm going to pull that back here in Indiana because I really want to focus here on NCOIL and where NCOIL is going to go with this, because I do think this is a national issue, not just a state issue. But just for, again, sake of just some data points, I did meet with our Department of Insurance, and I asked them, I said, I'm kind of going down this path of where's the good balance of public policy in disclosing what's all in this box, in this matrix that's used. What's good public policy? What at the same time keeps a competitive marketplace so that we're not sharing proprietary information or classified or confidential information. And they said it is a tough balance because there's a lot of data that's being used in these boxes that they have some concerns with. And I think we saw what happened in Washington State, with Commissioner Kreidler there kind of saying, hey, the pendulum's going to go all the way to this end, and we're just going to ban some of the use of this. And where I'm trying to find that place where I think NCOIL needs to go is how is that data processed and then provided to the client. A good example then is I asked the department yesterday, I said, how much, for example, I know I've used this example to a lot of people on this call, and you've heard me say it before, the Lemonade said we collect 5,000 data points. Everybody's appalled by that. And they said, well, we just had a filing in Indiana where a company came in with, they call them elements, 1,000 elements to use on our personal policy, home and auto. They said our actuary looked at this, found some things that were literally discriminatory, some that were in that proxy discrimination, which is what we addressed a couple years ago. And then those that they finally said, these are what you can use. It went from 1,000 elements down to 70. And so as I look at that, I think to myself, what were those 930 pieces of data that was asked to be used but denied? And it's not that we need to know what that is, but it really sheds light on the issue that right now a lot of data is being collected on people to be used scientifically and through these algorithms to create a rate. So what I really think, what I want to focus on as a model is to say, if you're going to use this data, there's no prohibition on that. But if I ask you, what are the factors that go into my rate as I'm a purchaser, as a consumer, if I ask you that, you've got to give me those, maybe the top 10 things you would use. And those would very likely include MBR credit, your clue report, other things that we traditionally have always held as to be normal. But if we start to use some of this AI, maybe that kind of surfaces up on a couple pieces that maybe people would have some concerns with. And then if it's an adverse action, you either deny me a policy or you raise my rates, then the trigger would be is that now the carrier would be required to disclose that. So I think some of the concern I've heard back from the carriers, we've had really good discussions the last 2 weeks, is, we're getting into the area where it really is very nuanced to what might be the issue on my policy may be different than Chairman Rowland's policy. And if I got to disclose that, it's going to be a lot of data that gets, that's unique to a client. And now I've got to be able to somehow manufacture or process that. So I understand there's some issues there. My pushback a little bit at was, we have the staff to create the box. I think we can find the staff to, push that data out. But anyway, I'm looking forward to a robust discussion as we start this process, because I really think that the bottom line is the consumer, and I asked them yesterday, have there been any complaints driven by some of what we're heading down this path? And the department said there's been a couple of complaints around, I got a rate increase and no one could explain it to me. My agent said he had no clue. My MVR hadn't changed. My clue report hadn't changed. So my agent said, I really have no clue what the carrier's using to give you this increase. Reached out to the carrier. The carrier said, it's proprietary. Can't tell you what it was. And so he filed a complaint with the department. And the department basically said, you don't have any grounds because we've approved them to use this data. So they're looking too to us kind of as, okay, you're the policymakers. I mean, Indiana, at least they look at it that way. You're the policymakers. What's good public policy? And then as we begin to go down this path, are there things that we have to look at and say, is it good public policy to be using X? You know, maybe it's the fact that I wear glasses, or, you know, I have gray hair. I mean, is there going to be issues that we get to that maybe cause a little concern on should that be used for data? So anyway, that's kind of where all this is at. I think what I really want this to be is a good path to get us to where we have transparency to the consumer, and the carriers have helped us get there. So that's where I'm at. And with that, I'll be more than happy to answer questions. Mr. Chairman, you know, looking forward to Las Vegas as we start this. And, you know, I'm looking forward to kind of all hands on deck, and we'll see where we go. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Representative Lehman. We appreciate you pulling off the road and taking some time for us today, and appreciate your discussion on this topic. Are there any committee members that have comments on this topic at this time?
Maybe I'll just say something sort of in a very general way, in encouragement of this conversation that past President Lehman wants to pursue. And I'll give a little update. Of course, just recently in California, we had a big single payer bill, came to the floor of my assembly, actually did not have the votes to get off the floor. Honestly, that was a little bit of a surprise. That was a colossal bill and just was short in double digits, so it did not advance. But it caused a lot of us to think about the nature of being a legislator. And it's sort of like, as lawmakers, really our process is all about four things. Someone may present what is a new idea or a wild idea. That triggers a conversation about maybe the pros and cons of that idea, the downsides, where the wheels might come off, sort of what are the criticisms. And then a good lawmaker and good colleagues in the legislative institution will listen to the wild idea, look at the criticisms, the possible issues with it, and try to figure out how to solve those issues. That's sort of de-risking the idea. So you can introduce change without totally disrupting things. And all of that then takes time. And so we have our process. We sort of hear ideas, learn about them, massage them. Anyway, I just sort of see that's the issue that past President Lehman is introducing on how we work with data, how we make that work. And so I just want to say, in this time, there's nothing more basic to lawmaking than wild idea. What are the criticisms? How do you de-risk it and afford yourself the time to do that? And then that just speaks to the strength of NCOIL as we, from the 50 states, gather and have these conversations. So I look forward to following the conversation. I think it's kind of what we do as lawmakers, actually. Where's some different way to understand an issue and how to serve our constituents. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other committee members or legislator that's on the call have questions, comments, thoughts on this topic? Hearing none, are there any interested parties or organizations who would like to speak on this topic? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move along from this topic. Looks like we're finished with that for the day, and look forward to continuing this discussion when we're out in Vegas. Thank you, Representative Lehman, for being here with us today.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, that wraps up all the topics that we had on the agenda for today. Is there any other business that needs to come before the committee at this time?
Move we adjourn.
Hearing none, we have a motion to adjourn from Assemblyman Cahill. We're adjourned. Thank you all for being here today. See you in Vegas.
Thanks, everyone.